Welcome, everyone, to the HeroX Innovation Leadership Speaker Series. I'm Jamie Elliott. I'm joined today by Mark Ignash, Strategic Initiatives and Ecosystem Development Director for the Michigan Office of Defense and Aerospace Innovation. Mark, it's really great to have you. Thanks for joining. Please tell us about you and your innovation journey so far.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure. And Jamie, appreciate you having me on today. Happy to share a bit of the story of what we're working on here on behalf of Team Michigan. So in my story, so I'm a native Michigander, born and raised, spent a little bit of time outside of the state, but moved back and for several reasons. But one of the reasons why, in terms of both my personal and professional life, is that I think the state has a lot to offer for the live, work, and play model. And, it's one thing to say it, but I live it and I try to bring that to others, whether it's in state or out of state as well. So my innovation journey, it's interesting that word is used, throughout my career now and almost 15 years in aerospace and defense related economic development. That word is used interchangeably for a lot of different words. I think innovation now is more meaningful than I think it's been in the past in terms of what it truly means. The speed and capability of what we are seeing brought to bear, not just in Michigan, but across the US. I came into this, I guess you could say several years back, I worked within our early stage startup incubator network within the state and worked with companies at that time that were aerospace defense oriented and trying to find ways to bring innovative technologies into the market, which at that time was more challenging. We didn't have the same mechanisms and contract vehicles we have now. There were no OTAs and things of that nature. And living that and seeing that was more of a challenging time. Seeing where we're at now and what we're able to do as a state and my position now, where I'm able to oversee a lot of our aerospace portfolio and defense as well, but specifically including space, it's a very promising time for commercialization of technology and innovation of that technology, both from the speed that I think the innovators want to see happen in terms of ability to get into the hands of those who want to use technologies, but also those that they need to get in the hands out. And I think the two-part equation is operating now in ways it hasn't been before. And so I've find myself working with a lot of technologies and capabilities that are maybe not considered innovative, and they're just part of the standard aerospace and defense portfolio. But then a lot of different type capabilities that I think, especially in the space sector, are innovative and are finding ways, I think, to be fielded more rapidly now than we've ever seen before. So it's been a winding journey for me. I can't say everything I've worked on has been quite quote unquote innovative, but it's certainly been within the aerospace defense markets. And I think now we find ourselves just in a very fortuitous time as a state and a nation in terms of ability to bring new technologies to bear.
Excellent. I'm curious to hear about the Michigan Office of Defense and Aerospace Innovation, specifically in what you all do, how you all see innovation, and how you all see how you innovate differently.
Absolutely. So our office last year, um, Governor announcement that what we were going to do is reimagine what was prior the Michigan Defense Center, which I worked in for several years as well. Reimagine with a broader mandate and opened aperture. Yes, defense, but also aerospace, and also more intentional on the keyword at the end there, the innovation side of the house. Not simply looking at what are the things that we can just do because we can. What are the things that we should be doing that we aren't, but for some innovation we can accomplish. So the office stood up about a year ago. Our mandate is it's simple in statement, but complex, I think, in application. I mean, we essentially exist to drive the advancement of and support of the defense and aerospace industry within the state. Defense is the state's third largest industry, trailing only automotive and agriculture. Aerospace is a component there within. We have over 4,000 companies in the defense industrial base, over 1,000 within aerospace, which covers traditional aviation and uncrewed systems and space, and growing. I think that's an aperture that we hadn't had ability to pursue prior necessarily, just given different times and different capability needs on the government side, and also the different opportunities for industry. So we exist for that purpose. Now that takes a lot of different forms and different permutations. This week, I happen to actually be in Orlando. I'm here for the Space Force Association Space Power Conference, on advancing that narrative for the state of Michigan in terms of what we have been and are doing in the space economy. And a lot of that work is addressing perception and addressing what folks believe Michigan to be to what it really is. And obviously, yes, I'm here sharing that, but there's also Michigan companies and academic partners as well here sharing that story as well, which is even more impactful than what I could ever share because they're living it and they're doing it. We're here just to support that. And how we approach innovation, you mentioned that. I think, like I said, we're in a time now where, and I'll just kind of gravitate towards the space economies because that's it's the topic of the week for me being at a Space Force conference. We are, as the Secretary of Air Force had a panel this morning, a keynote this morning, and as he put it, we are in the second space race. He said some may not want to see it, don't believe it, don't understand it or recognize it, but we are in a second space race and we have everything we need as a nation to, again, win that. But we have to realize that we're in it. And we have to also then understand that there are so many members of industry and academia and partners, nonprofits, et cetera, that want to help advance that, but for really just driving that message home that we have to work at that together. And so as a state, as an office, we see that, yeah, as technology, of course, technology innovation, but just innovation in thought as well as how do we partner within the state, across regions, within the Midwest. How do we work with partners across states where one state may say, we launch, we really don't do R&D or we don't do a lot of the materials development or we don't do the manufacturing. Well, Michigan, we do and we can be a part of that to augment really what the space economy is. And so, it's innovation both in technology capability across our portfolio, but also just in terms of how we approach the market and understanding that we are at a opportune time where we have commercial and defense dual use capabilities and opportunities advancing at a pace that just may not be seen again for decades. And the amount of commercialization that's happening, both for the benefit of commercial space and also for government needs and defense needs. Again, we're in the midst of something that we probably won't see again for a while. So we have to come on us to capitalize on that and make sure that we are elevating our space economy within the state to be able to at least have awareness of the opportunity and then being able to seize it.
Interesting. I find it interesting the parallels that I see, and with HeroX and some of the challenges that we get to run in space and in aerospace. There was one called Go Aero. They just announced their winners, I think, last week. Private competition, $2 million for autonomy-enabled emergency response flyers. And like you said, it's an opportune time. These types of things, 15 years ago would not get the popularity that they have now. I think it's cool to hear how that's happening at the state level. I'm wondering if you can talk about, you mentioned your portfolio a couple of times, what types of projects you have going on right now that you can share.
Yeah, so we are, in fact, we're in the midst right now. We're in a judging phase, but we launched our first, what we call our Michigan or MI Space Hackathon for space, and designed to do what? And I was having a conversation with another individual today, just regarding that's out of Space Force, trying to get real world challenges out of whether it's DoD, DHS, different departments into the hands of talent, whether that be undergraduate, graduate, or within industry, but access to real challenges that otherwise, if not seeing the light of day, may go unsolved, or we may just be stuck with status quo solutions because of the lack of getting those out into the hands of those that are really day in and day out working on solutions. So what is the current challenge where we are at this stage, almost the tail end of, but what was that all about? What we know to be true about the state of Michigan is a couple things. We have unmatched talent, both as we look at those coming out of university, college programs, as well as looking at the trades. But that being said, we net the top engineering talent, bar none, out of all the 50 states. That's all, not all aerospace, but aerospace is a significant part of it. And space is a piece that we are finding the more we expose our talent to, the more they are either willing to go at it or ready to go at it. And so we partnered with Coast Guard. U.S. Coast Guard was our kind of our anchor federal partner in this to address remote sensing and ice pack formation. We have, as many know, the Great Lakes, which operate essentially as small oceans. And ice pack is both a concern commercially as well as potentially as we have a defense posture as well in the northern Arctic regions. So what we did is we essentially said, hey, we've got data sets, publicly available data sets that have been developed from satellites, remote sensing capability. Get that in the hands of the students. We're saying, hey, the current solutions are yes, remote sensing is used. It's not used to its maximum potential. Our federal partners have shared kind of their thoughts on that, and we said, can we do it better? Here's the problem set. We need to have better real time understanding of ice pack and positioning of cutters in peacetime, positioning of other craft in other times, and it can't simply be take the ship out there and check it manually. That is not effective, not sustainable. I'm not saying that's what's happening now, but ultimately that's the best way to check unless you have a better way of remote sensing capabilities. So that's what we did. We put that out there, put out the data set, and the students got to work. They formed teams, and we've got submissions now that are being judged. And that's, I don't want to say we're not surprised. Of course, we are going to be surprised by the ingenuity, the way the data is being used, the solutions being presented, but not surprised by the fact that we had talent ready to go. But for sharing, here's the opportunity. And how cool is that to think, okay, well, how do I utilize an asset in space, data that's actually available right now, that's it's publicly available, to potentially solve an actual real world problem that an agency such as Coast Guard or otherwise need help solving without having to
Right.
necessarily go through some arduous unknown process, which of course, yes, teams are vetted and we did those pieces, but we were able to really lower that barrier to connecting dots of problem, challenge, and let's identify solutions. And so that's been really neat to see that process. Very excited to see as judging wraps what those solutions those are, and happy to share more as that comes out of the gates as a final product. But it's been very encouraging and also interesting and fun to see what's happened in a short period of time for an inaugural event. You think sometimes you launch something and folks are going to be skeptical or slow to the uptake. And no, there are teams that are in the institutions that are actively watching for challenges like this. And once they pop up, they get to work. So it's been very neat and very encouraging. So that's one project that's near its tail end, and we're hoping to have more of these as we advance, utilizing space-based technologies and solving real challenges, real problems. Another is where we're exploring, in the next year, how do we, as you mentioned, innovation, how do we launch for Michigan, what our version of Innovation Hub could be to do what? Harness what we are good at, what we do, what we know to be our strengths, right? It's testing, engineering, R&D, manufacturing. How do we take those skills? How do we take the brain power and the brain trust that comes out of our academic institutions? How do we concentrate that, resource it, and really drive some of this innovation through hopefully what can be a catalyst, and get it into market, get it into the hands of those that need it. And so we're looking at that effort to be launched here in calendar year 2026. And that's been, again, an effort that's been in years in the making as we've looked at what's an approach, what's the best approach, how do we get at the problems we're seeing at hand that need to be solved in the space economy, and what's our fit, what's Michigan's fit. I think we're often asked, and even this week already asked, interesting, Michigan in the space equation. What is that? What's that look like? And, most aren't aware that in the 40s, Michigan was a part of that as NASA was stood up and we exported both talent and product to help make that happen. But most don't realize we also have, companies across the state solving those problems today using remote sensing technologies, space debris removal, looking at propulsion and basic components and parts I say basic, but to get into space, that be fairly well vetted, and all of that good stuff. So that space economy's here. Big part of our job is just really getting out there and making sure folks are aware of it, and us then really focusing on what are we good at and how do we lever it to really support the national space economy. That's the mission set here. It's not to try to become anything more than what we know we can be, which is a leader in what we do and do best. So that's the mission here, and that's both innovation, that's manufacturing, and providing opportunity to our talent base.
I think you're right about the energy that comes with it, right? When you, especially with students, we see it a lot with students, student challenges, student competitions. There's this energy about solving these problems especially when they're real world problems or real out of world problems, but the real problems that need to be solved. And we got to see it with the FAA, the data challenge that they ran last year. And it was each team had to get their own data and solve their own problem. They had to pitch a problem that they wanted to solve using data and data science and advanced analytics, and then go solve that and then pitch it. And what was interesting is, every team did a phenomenal job. And I know from the judging sessions, it was a tough decision. What I thought was interesting was that the team that ultimately won was not a team of data scientists. They were a team of pilots who went and did some research and found some publicly available Python libraries and some instructions on Stack Overflow on how to run them, and then modified them for their data set. And it was all about sentiment analysis of air traffic control and helping understand if there's frustration, for example, in air traffic control waves, and what that could mean, and throwing up some alerts about things. And it happened to be timely with some things that were going on in the country at the time, but it's like you said, there's that energy and that, leveraging that, it's innovating in a different way. You mentioned early in the discussion, even innovating in your funding mechanisms, right? These other authorities, these other purchasing authorities that are now available that weren't available. What I'm curious about from your perspective, we this is an assumption, but we expect to see interconnectivity between students, right? There's maybe not between schools, there will be rivalries and things like that, but student bodies, and even actually there was a team that partnered up, two universities in that challenge. But you also mentioned these 4,000 companies that you have in Michigan in the industry. What do you see with regard to interconnectivity of them and solving problems together? Or is there are they working together? Are they collaborating to solve problems where and maybe augment each other where there are gaps? Do you see any of that?
We do. We see it in a few spots. I'm sure you've heard the terms, competimates, folks in the industry that, yes, compete, but can also team with the right conditions being set. We are seeing this. We're seeing it in again, because we're innovation focused, or at least looking at kind of the technology based work we're doing. Because I'll share it where I'm seeing it in some of the areas where it's more of that cutting edge tech that our industry is developing, right? So we're seeing it, yes, in space. We're seeing it in uncrewed systems as well. Uncrewed systems, whether autonomous or just simply uncrewed, right? Folks use those interchangeably, and they can be very different. They are very different potentially. Platforms are needing capabilities, technologies, and simple mindset application that industry more and more often is finding, oh, they don't have it all in one house. And instead, and this is just the large, it's smalls and mids. And instead of saying, okay, well, try to find the right folks, let's try to plug and play industry and partners together. We're seeing that more, again, advanced aerial, whether it's the sensor capabilities, it's the chassis upon which they are fitting payloads, especially as we're looking at what we call now more attritable drones and uncrewed systems that are meant to be maybe one-way applications. We've never, even in the last decade, thought about how do we scale platforms that we really intend to only go one way, not drones, right? You look at large drones of historical programs of record, MQ-9s, Reapers. Okay, yeah, those are going to be out there for a long time, and we want those back, right? We don't want those going down. Those need to come home. Understood. That's a lot of work. That's going to be a large prime. That's going to be a supply chain. That's great stuff. We want to be a part of that too. But we hadn't looked at, no, we really don't want that now. We want scale, hundreds of thousands of platforms that may be carrying very expensive payloads, whether kinetic payloads or just sentry packages. Overall platform itself needs to be less costly. It needs to not be a perfect solution. It needs to be good enough to achieve the mission, and whether it comes back or not, an acceptable loss or an acceptable, recovery. Hadn't thought that way. So I think we're seeing industry now saying, okay, well, we don't need to develop a perfect solution. We need to take what we've got as a company. Say we have the Sentry package integration that we know we could utilize for something like this. Let's go find the company that then builds the platform and just partner and then develop something together. Versus we're going to make a drone, they're going to make the drone. We're seeing it there. So that I've seen. Not to speak ad nauseum on space, but we're seeing it significantly there too as well. Companies realizing there's a piece of this where industry does not have to have the entire solution. They just have to have the right partners. We're seeing it there. We're also seeing it in microelectronics. So state of Michigan, we are one of three partnered states in the Silicon Crossroads Microelectronics Commons Hub. Lots of words and of course makes acronyms. But why are we partnered in such a way? Which you're going, well, you're Michigan. Why would you partner with states? Well, some of the critical needs that we're talking about, it goes beyond borders, a national need. And what we found is Team Midwest is a powerhouse as it relates to electronics, development, design, materials. And so what's that designed to do? It's designed to take industry, academia, large, small, and say, work together, develop lab to fab prototypes quickly. It's not really designed to say, let's stand up a brand new business that does only one thing, or let's not just take 4 companies and merge them. It's how do we take those capabilities, put them together, design an application that can get to the fab side of the house quickly and enable our supply chain of microelectronics in a way that right now we can't source US domestically, which is a massive problem. So again, it's more of whether it's organic partnering or facilitated, let's get folks in the room together, not just to say in 10 years, have a partnership form, but let's say in 10 months or less, have something prototyped that otherwise may never have been done, right? So short answer is yes. Long answer is what I just went through. And we're seeing it in other places as well. But it's encouraging. And part of that too is the difference. You mentioned the funding vehicles, right? Not all of these are traditional contracts where you have to have the prime and the supply chain and this and all the formal mechanics all mapped out, which takes over a year in itself, right? Part of it is just simply being able to more quickly form a team, develop a proposal, get to the solution, a good enough solution, maybe not perfect, to get to that next step. So we are seeing that. And that's part of, I think, what's enabling not just Michigan, but many states and many regions and being a bit more agile and quicker to develop solutions. And quite frankly, and we can understand it, a bit more impatient on what's the next. How do we get the next thing? Because we can
Yeah.
be more agile. So
Right.
do that.
Yeah, it's kind of that concept of the elastic enterprise, right? Which was made, I think Amazon's early days are often studied for that. They would find the partner that could solve the thing very quickly, use that partner, and then move on. So they would expand and contract as they needed to solve certain mission critical things. And from what you're sharing, I think it's impactful because of that cross company, cross state collaboration, and that's a really important message, I think, these days is to see that, hear those stories about it. And then what you talked about with the prototyping and making things more affordable. I do think oftentimes people think about aerospace and space as expensive, right?
Yes.
And there's a lot going on in the last 10 years to debunk that myth or to just say, that's not the way it has to be anymore. I got to work on one with National Institute of Standards and Technology, and it was about low cost drones, low cost flyers that could go into a building. Let's say there was a partial collapse, for example, and map the area and bring that map back or the video back to someone, but it could get damaged in the process. There might be something, it might be an unstable building, things may fall down. So it has to be low cost. You have to be able to replace it, and it has to be purchasable by local emergency, first responders, and who don't always have unlimited budgets. Oftentimes, quite the opposite. So the whole challenge really was about, is it good enough, right? Let's do a stage of this challenge and see if it's good enough. Let's do another stage and see if we can actually take these things out to the field and test them. And that's a fun thing for me as a challenge designer, is to get to dive into those problems and understand, what's important for each stage and what is not as important. And we could, look beyond and maybe address in a later stage once we've figured out the critical components. So any other impactful projects? Any other impactful stories you'd like to share?
Well, you just mentioned, I'm gonna pull a thread on, we've kept been on this thread of accessibility. And I think you're 100% right in terms of I think there's a perception that, yeah, space in particular, wow, it's way too expensive to get into. There's no way we can even touch it. And say we being just a small to mid-sized manufacturer, R&D design firm, it's like, no way. How do we even get involved in that? And I think that's the piece where, I recently read, I don't know where, if there was a primary source or not, but, the notion that, well, the spaces economy isn't for everyone. And of course it's not. I mean, neither is the defense industrial base a place for every single business. But the difference is that the space economy is not the same as when we were putting Saturn V's up in space. It's just not. It's a very different place now. And I think ability to enter for those that have a capability and have a place in space economy, I think that barrier has lowered. And why? It's commercializing. We've got industry putting funds into this, unlike, again, we'll see for decades, likely. And so I think, of course, it's not for everyone. And that's not the message that everyone should be a key member of the space economy. But I think if folks aren't aware that they can be, that is the miss. That is the miss. Because how many capabilities are out there right now that, but for industry or a researcher and an academic, knowing that, okay, it's a bit more accessible than I thought, let me go have that conversation versus it's too expensive to get into. No way. I don't want to move different state or wherever I'm in. Pick a state. I'm in Montana. I'm in Michigan. I'm in Maine. Who knows? I don't want to go to one of the space states. Well, maybe you don't have to. Maybe you don't have to. And so really it's just a measure of accessibility and potentially affordability. Not to say it's for everyone. Of course it's not. But I think the changing tides here is that, and I think it's less costly to make that assessment and understand, is it for me as an industry member or as an institution, right? So it's a key piece I think that you hit on that I think is very important. Is it's the second space race as this morning it was it was shared with us. It's different than the first. It just is.
Yeah. Well, you're right. And I'm glad you brought that back, because it seems like in the first space race, we thought about space as another frontier, right? And the way that we had, as a civilization, talked about frontiers before that it was about discovery. It was about the unknown, right? And I think that a part of this second space race is an economic frontier. There's a lot of economic discovery, and reducing those barriers to entry into this market is something that is happening. And so when people say, I don't have anything to do with space, I don't, my domain, because that frontier is opening, because those barriers are being removed, I think people could, if they think about it, right? What was it? Cordless power drills that we have at home, that all of us have at home, were invented because of space, right? Because in order to do spacewalks and to go fix things on the outside of a space shuttle, you couldn't have a power cord dangling behind you. And so they invented the battery pack that could go into power tools. Similarly, we got to run this really cool one with NASA called Mars XR, and they did 2 iterations of it. And it was virtual reality assets and environments for astronauts to learn how to live and work on Mars. And so at face value, if you just glanced at the challenge competition, you would think, oh, this is for virtual reality designers and people that have something to do with Mars, astronauts, those types of things. But when you read deeper, you realize the reason they were doing it was so that they could put the VR headsets on the astronauts on Earth, have them interact in these environments and with these assets that got developed to study their human physiology. So even folks that have traditionally worked in healthcare now find domains or subdomains into which they can enter and say, well, I want to study human physiology or nutrition. I think I saw an article yesterday about studying menstruation in space because it wasn't a factor when it was on all male astronaut, population. And now we need to study that because not only will more females be going to space, but they will be going to deep space. And so these things just need to be thought about and studied. So there's a lot there that folks can enter into. Like you said, it opens up a lot.
Absolutely. Medical research on the ISS. I mean, it's a whole new realm of potential solutions, cures, fill in the blank that we've never been able to even fathom developing before. So, side note, just about Mark. So I'm also engaged with a rocket club I have 2 young sons, and NASA's got a proposal out where they're going to have elementary students, elementary, middle school, and high school, but down to elementary, developing solutions for how to better grow organic produce on the moon or Mars. The winning submission, and again, I get it, there's going to be one, there's probably thousands of submissions. The winning submission, though, will be going, up into space. Now, how wild is that? In the 60s, there's nothing a kid would have done that would have said, you know what, buddy, if you figure out something really cool works and put it in space. No way. And
Yep.
now it's a thing. And now I've got, my 10-year-old thinking, and they're getting simulated regolith and everything that these kids get. I mean, it's just wild. So
Awesome.
that,
That's so cool.
yeah, the scalability, the ability, again, it's not for every kid, but yeah, we're past the, is it possible to put a foot on the moon? Now we're saying, well, once we're living on the moon, how do we live on Mars? That's what we're asking, which is already the assumption
Yep.
of we know we can live on the moon. It's just, what's it look like? And let's bring, yeah, I mean, so I think it's just wild. And I think getting at talent that young, that's the key too, because if in elementary school, you're thinking about how we, you if you've read or watched the movie The Martian, how do I actually do that for real? And I'm thinking about that in 5th grade. We're going to have some brilliant solutions by the time, these youngsters are now in middle school and high school and college. Just it's the ability, I think, to advance these pieces now. It's just, again, yeah, it's costly, but it's scaling to the point where we're able to harness a lot more brain trust. So it's encouraging. It's exciting.
When I was project managing on the Watts on the Moon challenge, which was the $5 million across 2 years to build prototypes of solutions that could transmit and store electricity generated on the lunar surface. And so they actually had to build these things and test them in vacuum chambers. And I got to meet with NASA every week for this challenge. And I also have 2 sons. So this would have been 3-4 years ago. My older son was 11, 10 at the time. We were walking to his camp one day and he said, "When do you meet with NASA?" And I said, "Every Wednesday." And he said, "Can you ask them, why don't we just send the trash from Earth in the direction of the sun?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll ask him." So I asked him, and on my next meeting, and this is, I think this speaks to a lot of what we've been talking about. It's just an anecdote. I asked them that question and they said, "Well, you tell your son that if he can figure out how to get the trash off the surface of the earth in a cost-effective way, then we would like to have a meeting with him." And then they said, "Would he like a stick?" And they sent this care package. I mean, stickers and patches. I've got a bunch. Still got a stack of them here. They, it's, and that goes back to something you've been talking about this whole time, which is the energy and the encouragement of the young people in this space, right? There is an electricity around this. It's always been exciting. It's always, getting to the moon. But like you just said, that accessibility has not always been there, and now it is. And yeah, it's just getting more and more fun. It's only getting better, right?
It is. Absolutely is. So yeah, so bring it back full circle. That's why, I think every single state has a play in this. I think the space economy is open to any that want to approach it. Not that all can be successful in it, but if a 10-year-old has an opportunity to propose a solution that may actually gain legs and run, that is an encouraging sign to me that, all right, let's take this stuff for serious and let's keep at it. Both of the talent side and industrial side and the research side. So it's good stuff. It's very anecdotal, but it's also very real. So I appreciate the ability to share about it.
So, real quick, what advice would you have for anybody that's thinking about this? Let's say this talk just inspired someone to say, "You know what? Maybe there is something I could do. Maybe, what would you encourage them to do? What steps would you encourage them to take?"
I would start with because there's a lot of different avenues, right? And so so I would start with the assumption that if you're really we'll just pick space for just the sake of the topic, engage. There are so many avenues. Assume there's an avenue, and then we need to figure out who is the right avenue to approach and in what fashion, right? I said because, like I said, elementary school kids that want to engage in that, so they can do it. There just has to be an avenue. I would say if you're talent, if at university or high school, or I mean, not younger as I'm watching this, but if you're at the age of seeing this, and whether it's high school or it's college, I mean, start asking around about different space challenges. At the high school level, there's Higher Orbits. Another role I've got with the National Defense Industrial Association, we've sponsored Higher Orbits, and that's also taking students at that age and helping them to engage with problem sets in space. And connectivity. I mean, NASA is not as far as they used to be in terms of connection, to your point. I think that's one direction. University level, start probing around depending on, where you're at for different space challenges, for different, I think those are really great ways because, there's a lot of challenges out there. It's not novel that we're doing, and there's probably one every single day. Get involved in those challenges, and that will inevitably connect you into folks in the space economy. And then that network of, however they say it, the 6 degrees of separation, that shrinks really quick, really quick. So signal that interest, do that. Industry, I mean, look at the different industrial associations, depending on where you're at. I mean, obviously there's the NDAs of the world, there's the AFAs of the world. In Michigan, there's Aerospace Industrial Association of Michigan, which is Michigan centric. However, another association to engage with. It's really to start asking the questions of how do I engage it? Where do I engage it? Obviously for our purposes, there's no wrong door. We're happy to help ferry folks forward. But I guess my biggest advice is don't assume that it's a lockout market, because there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of ability to engage. Yeah, and it's, I think, scaling in a way that just hadn't been before. So don't assume it's going to price you out. Don't assume it's going to, I guess, lock folks out just based on we think that everyone. I'm not knocking it. We have to have very smart people. You have to have folks that their entire careers, PhDs, multiple PhDs, absolutely. But that doesn't mean you have to do that to play a role in the space economy. You can play a role, and I guess that's
sure.
my message is you can play a role in this no matter where you sit, quite frankly. And to your point, even with different skill sets. So advice is don't assume you're locked out. Don't assume it's cost prohibitive. Test that assumption. Test it, because in maybe some cases it is. Maybe in some cases you have to go and get an advanced degree. So don't assume it's just an open door, but don't assume it's an impossibility. I tell both my sons. One is the youngest, wants to be an astronaut. I said, perfect, great. That is a very, very select few. No matter what, it's a select few. My oldest wants to be a NASA engineer. I said, now you're opening the door. You can probably get at that a little easier. Then, heck, what if you want to make the spacesuits? There's a company in Michigan that are supplying spacesuit components to the prime that's actually putting the spacesuits on the next folks that go to the moon. You can play that role, and you never even thought you could, right? So I think it's just don't assume you're locked out. Don't assume it's a market that you have to be in some special circle to inquire about. You have to get in the circle. You have to explore circles. But once you're in those, and if you've got that passion, and that you start connecting with folks very quickly, and it's a lot of opportunities. So just my advice is don't assume it's an impossible market to enter. Even in innovation in uncrewed systems, I mean, it's becoming much more reachable. Don't assume it's not, and reach out to webinars like this or other folks in economic development or within industry. Reach out and probe in terms of ways to get engaged, because it's certainly a market that's expanding. So that's the message we carry.
That's great advice. Thanks. You mentioned a bunch of organizations in there. We will be sure to put all those links in the description so that folks can just click right through and
Sure.
learn more. Any other organizations you would mention that you're a part of or that you support that you'd like us to put in there?
Just again, and it's not exhaustive, but so Space Force Association, obviously, I'm here this week for their annual conference here, at least one of their conferences. That's certainly one on the Space Force front. NDIA, AFA, Air Force Association, Women in Defense, another solid organization. And again, not centric on any one part of the market, just defense specific. And look at different organizations, AUSA, yes, even associated U.S. Army's got applications. And again, I'm thinking in the Michigan sphere. And there are others. There are certainly others, but definitely ones to take a look at, get involved with. And if you folks find others, ping them. Again, the list is not exhaustive. New groups are forming all the time, which is awesome. Reach out to those groups and start engaging.
Mark, this has been truly inspiring. I really want to thank you for your time. I hope you enjoy the Space Force conference there, and really appreciate it. Hope to do more of these.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Anytime. My pleasure.
All right. Take care.
Thanks. You too.